Hello, everybody. I'm Elif Schaefer, your host for the What the Candidate Says podcast. We try to create a community for the candidates who are going through challenging times. We share our feelings and thoughts when we were or are in these phases. And for this mission, I have Jessica Bihunda with me today. Hi, Jessica. How are you?
Hi, Elif. I'm good, thank you.
Thanks for participating this episode on a nice Saturday morning. So I have part of your journey and I love hearing it, but for our audience, can you tell us a little bit about of your career journey, please?
Okay, so I'm a data analyst, but my journey was not really straightforward. I finished my studies with a master in business, strategy and innovation, to be precise. And when it was time for me to enter the workforce, I went into a very business-oriented work job, and I didn't like it. So it was at that point where I thought, is this really what I want? Mind you, I love business. I'm very interested in every business topics, but I really thought about, is this the type of role, the type of position I can see myself doing for the rest of my working life? And it wasn't. So I quit my job after 4 months. And for another 4 months, I was jobless. I really thought about what's next, what's out there. I have a very theoretical, academically speaking, background, so I didn't really know what's out there. And I read through a lot of things, looked at a lot of job offers, and then I saw an internship. And it was related to the business side of things, but also putting numbers behind it. And I thought that makes sense, that's logical. I was not the most mathematical, statistical person, but I like when things make sense. And adding numbers, adding data to a topic that is not always seen as analytical was a great challenge. And the internship was about people analytics. And I joined SoundCloud back then for 1 year in total. I loved it, and I wanted to know more about numbers. I wanted to know more about how to actually elevate a department with insights. So after that, I went to another Berlin company, Zalando, and I continued my journey in people analytics there. And then I thought, okay, so, I've seen people data, but what about customer data? Because customers are also people. So I expanded a bit my horizon and internally moved into analytics related to the customer care of Zalando. And from there, I decided to move country because, why not? Might as well keep on changing, keep on growing in every aspect of my life. And ended up at a company called Treatwell, where I again went from customer experience data to customer journey in general to then insights in general, cross-departmentally in every aspect of the company. And yeah, this is where I'm at the moment. I'm looking at numbers in every aspect that is possible.
What a journey. Wow.
It is, yeah.
I want to go back to a few points you mentioned. First of all, it's not so usual people quit their jobs without knowing what the next step is going to be. It's kind of a risk. It's like, since it's unusual, people react, oh, what have you done? Like, how could you do this? And all these feelings coming together, you feel maybe more, I don't know, vulnerable. It's a risk you took so early on. Congrats and lots of respect.
I'm not gonna lie, I make it sound so nice and easy, and I dealt with a lot of shame because obviously you just got your diploma, and then I quit my job. I had no money, so I went back to my mom's home. So I dealt with guilt as well for being a potential financial burden. It was one of the most difficult season in my life, but I was lucky to have a good support system And I really could then take the time to figure out, because I thought, okay, this once, if possible. And yeah, so thank you for the congratulations, but I just want to make sure I don't make it sound like it was easy breezy and that I knew what I was doing. It was a big risk, but I really think the bigger risk was to stay in a role, in a path, on a path that was not going to bring me joy. And that was too much of a risk.
And how did it help you in the next steps? Like taking this big risk that time, and you went through it, you were fine in the end, you proved this to yourself. And like maybe I'm being a bit like predictive, but how did it help you in this internal transition you had later on?
I think it's a very good question. And I like what you said about I proved to myself. Because this is basically what I needed to learn. I needed to understand what drives me and recognize when my inner fire is ignited or not, and understand when is it worth to make a big move, because changing company, changing role even within a company, it's still a big change because you're doing different things, you have different responsibilities and stakeholders sometimes. But being able to go back to my inner voice, inner self, having done that early on in my career, I could keep on doing it. And this is when I knew when it was making sense to look out for the next potential challenge, because sometimes you don't need a new challenge. Sometimes you just need a new project. Or sometimes you don't need a permanent change. Maybe you just need to be for a few months shadowing another department. But being able to understand and recognize what you really want and what you really need is what will help you know when it's worth taking the risk of change.
Exactly. Like very first step is the self-awareness, knowing what comes
Exactly.
next. And this gives you courage. Being brave is easier that way. And I want to touch a little bit more on this internal transition, because I know for some people it's also very difficult. They become shy and hesitant to start talking about it in their existing company. How was it for you?
I think I've been very lucky to work in companies where I felt safe, openly discussing what I want in the midterm and in the long term. And sometimes your long-term expectations or your long-term aspirations would not fit the department or the company, but I felt safe talking about it. I've had great managers and mentors, and I think that really helped me to then make those moves internally, because I never felt like I was betraying or leaving anybody behind. But looking back, even if I was in a situation where I might not have support from my manager, I would have support from myself. That sounds very cheesy, but in the end, it's for yourself. Like, you are you. And I am not working for a manager. I'm working to pay my bills, but also to grow for myself.
That's so true. I mean, it definitely depends on the culture you're in. It might be difficult for some people to share these advances, your maybe plans to move forward in different direction. But yeah, if you don't get the support, like, should you hide it? Like, it doesn't bring you much. That's I also agree. So you have done a little bit of changes, like from companies, different roles. So you have lots of interview experiences, and I want to talk about these experiences. Maybe you can tell us about the most interesting, I don't know, interview moment. It can be good or bad.
So I have two. I have one because it was the most interesting questions I had in the very final stage of a recruiting process. And I'm not going to say which company, but basically the person who was supposed to approve my role, we were just chit-chatting. It was the beginning of the interview, and then he said, listen, I'm not going to ask about your technical skills. Obviously, you're a good communicator, but what would you do if I would give you 10 million right now? And it kind of took me off guard, because I was prepared to have what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? What does your mom say about you? You know, those one-on-one interview questions. And I was like, 10 million. Okay, give me a second. And then I said, first, I'm going to give 1 million to my mom because she's always been there for me. And I was for 4 months unemployed on her couch crying. No, and then I said, I am not someone who knows how to deal with such a large amount of money. So I will probably hire someone to manage that money and hopefully also multiply it so I can sustain it. And I really like that question, especially looking back, because first, it took me off guard. So sometimes when you're so guarded and you have a script in an interview, you can't be your authentic self. But it also allowed me to show how I think in general, that, you know, I am aware of my limits. I am someone who does practice gratitude. So obviously, you know, I'm starting with 10, but maybe starting with 9 is also okay if I can show in a materialistic way some gratitude to the relevant people. And it just from there, you know, it also allowed me to show my goofy side, and then the interview continued very, very nicely.
Yeah, that's very interesting. I'm not so sure how I would react to it. Like, definitely, I would need a moment to think about it, but it would be a surprise, like you said. Like, it's not something you expect to hear. Among all the questions we know we are going to be asked, the failures we had, our learnings about it, and if we would, I don't know, do things differently. But this is, yeah, risky question, like for
It
both
definitely
sides.
is. Yeah. And also because, you know, you always think I need to apply the STAR method in my answer. And I thought, how am I going to do that? So I thought, you know what, just answer the question, however it's going to come out. And another very interesting experience I've had, and this one is more recent, was when I was applying for a role, even though I wasn't really sure about the job description, because the job description was a bit vague, but the company culture seemed very interesting. And as I started my first interview with the recruiter, from what she explained to me about the role and the job description, I actually was in a position to say, but that doesn't really match. Mind you, I was really interested in that role. And the more she told me about it, the more it was exciting. But I told her, your job description is not enough. It doesn't do the role justice. And being able to be in a position where I now have gathered years of experience that I can even give my unsolicited advice, it made me feel good and confident. And as I progressed through the recruiting stages, I felt more and more sure about myself. And I think it really helped me put my best self forward.
Yeah, that's also a very, very interesting experience. Like you said, it comes with confidence. If it's among your first interviews, you wouldn't probably feel safe to give them this feedback. But yeah, I'm distracted a bit here. Yeah, it's very important, again, to be aware of what you're looking for, and also make it like two-way street. Like,
Exactly.
you are also giving them feedback so they can improve their processes, and yeah, do some self-reflections how they are doing the job descriptions. You actually gave some like signs what makes you comfortable during interviews, but maybe you can summarize it once more. Like, how do you feel? What conditions during interviews make you comfortable?
Yeah, I think to bounce back on what you last said, that it's a two-way street, that it's more conversation than an interrogation. Even though, you know, you want to receive the right question so that you can put your everything you've prepared yourself for forward, it still needs to flow seamlessly, because nervosity it's normal, but when there's too much of it, this is when you start to forget things. This is when you start to give the answer that you did not have in your mind. And when I'm really comfortable is when I really can have a conversation like what we have now. And I think it's in the interviewer's responsibility to ensure that, because in the end, I'm just an applicant, and I will just react to how things are presented to me.
Yeah, I agree that so much. Like when I think back at some of the interviews, when I came out, I felt not so good. I felt it was unfair. Like I was too nervous. I stayed nervous because I didn't get feedback. Like one of them was saying, sure, sure. Like there was no other thing but just sure after my answers. And I was like, just like this expression in my face, like what does this mean? Like I don't like, did
Should
you
I
hear me?
expect?
Did you hear what I really said? And opposite, like when the interviewer is like paraphrasing what I said and giving instant feedback what they think about my answers, like, oh, okay, so I feel more comfortable.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah,
really
knowing where
true.
you stand, and even in the end, even if in the end you don't progress further, it's an exchange. At the end of the day, we're human, and we need to have that exchange. And also, at least you won't be surprised if it's a rejection, because you kind of understand. You realize, oh yeah, okay, indeed, maybe I do not have that experience. However, this is valuable feedback I'm capturing for my next application, or for in a year once I've actually practiced this one thing I seem to still need improvement for.
That's so true as well. For employer branding, they have to make sure that the candidate goes out feeling that they were treated fairly, and the feedback is a big part of it. So let's wrap up and give some additional or the same advice as we gave already to the hiring managers, recruiters who can adjust the processes based on our feedback, and also to the audiences who are currently in job search. What would you like to tell them?
So besides what we've mentioned about making it a conversation, setting a tone that makes the applicant as comfortable as possible, communication. It's not just about the interview. Usually, I don't know how many interview stages there are, like 4, 3, 4, 5, depending on the role. But in between, it can be a few days, just like a few weeks. If it's longer than a few days, please talk to us applicants. We want to know where we stand, even if it's just to say, hey, listen, we still at it. I'm waiting for feedback, or there is some delay because maybe there's holidays or sickness, but just tell us something so we know, are you still interested? Are we still in that process or not? Because there's nothing worse than to get ghosted. There's nothing worse than not knowing where you stand, especially if you have an interview, like you said, where you don't even know how it went. It's very demanding for the candidate, but most importantly, if the candidate has other companies they're interviewing with, and those companies keep them updated, you might lose a very valuable person just because you forgot to keep them engaged, basically.
That's so well said.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again for joining me for this episode, and thanks for listening, and stay tuned for the next episodes. Bye.
Bye.